Well, I thought I'd surprise my subscribers with a Thursday stream. Uh, and I wanted the topic to be something relating to writing for once. Um, Again, I'm open to discussing this along with the next romance video. But I've mentioned before that I'm not a fan of time skips uh, because I think they're a very lazy way for a writer to have character development happen but not be willing to show how that happens. So I just want to warn before we get too much into this, um, because everybody's seen Dragon Ball. I don't need to tell you that that's going to be talked about. But like for Young Justice, for example, there are people who've never seen that show, and I don't want to potentially spoil anything for them. So I'll keep my criticisms of it very light in terms of not revealing too much about the plot. Just kind of talking about what certain things about characters I like and don't like. Um, but I'm still going to mention, obviously, that there's a time skip in the show because why else would it be brought up here if there wasn't one? In a stream called Time Skips. So the first time I ever became aware of time skips was in Dragon Ball, and the show has a lot of them. Just in the first series in Z, and some people actually count those as the same show. But in the original, all the time skips were done just for training, just to have some character get stronger and have some passage of time indicate that they've really powered up. Um, which made me kind of content with it, just whatever. And the same thing happened in Z, where there's a year between the start of the Saiyan saga and then when Nappa and Vegeta show up to Earth. And I was fine with that as well because all that happened during that time was training and then also some development between Piccolo and Gohan's relationship, which we got to see, um, in multiple scenes between when Piccolo takes Gohan and then, when they start fighting the Saiyans. When they have the time skip after Namek, it's been a year, you know, again, nothing has happened. And then they have another 3 years to train for the androids. So what I'm getting to you, and then they also, if you want to count the time chamber, which is a 1 year worth of training in a day, um, that's another example of a time skip in the show. But the point I'm seeking to convey here is that from the very start of Dragon Ball all the way up to the end of the Cell Saga, almost every time there's a time skip, or seemingly every time there's a time skip, I'm not talking about like, oh, it's 1 day later, but years or a year, just some significant amount of time has passed. So whether it's months, a year, or years, it's always done for the explicit purpose of giving there enough gap in time, right? To make the character's training and their subsequent increase in strength seem more feasible and make it to where you can now believe, yeah, they might have a chance of beating the villain. Look how much time they spent training for these antagonists. Um, and it was, that's the kind of time skip I have no issue with because it moves the story forward. It um, it allows us to have enough suspension of disbelief that these people who are always getting stronger when given excessive amounts of time to train become more powerful. um there was, I had no issue with it because it really seemed as if every time there was a time skip used, no pun intended, it was for the purpose of furthering the narrative, right? And then all the character development, just stuff that would happen that would actually change how characters act, would happen during the story. But when you get to the Buu saga, you have, just to give you an example, you have Vegeta who has gone from swearing that he'll never fight again to and basically just having a kid with this woman that he doesn't really seem that interested in, to now being married with her, now being domesticated, now training his son. And it's a pretty big set of things that's happened over this 7 year period. And it's the first example of a major thing occurring, just this like really big shift in the character's way of acting happening off screen. It's the same thing with Gohan where he stops training. So at the end of the Cell Saga, he's now, supposedly the strongest ever, uh, is going to protect Earth, yada, 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 and then stops training. And it's just this person in school. And it goes back to my thing of how the Boo Saga starts using time skips as a manner in which to introduce a character or have some character that's already been introduced and then do some major thing with their status quo that would have been more interesting to see versus being told about it after it's already happened. You can look at Krillin, for example. This was a character who, from the time he was introduced, all the way back in the second arc of the overall series, the first tournament, was always training, was always one of the few people that kept trying no matter what. And he meets this android during the Cell Saga who he barely interacts with all that much. And now they're, I guess married and have a child, and he no longer is wanting to train. And it goes back to my thing of how, that premise would have been much more interesting to actually see play out versus being told about it. I would have preferred to have seen some scenes that illustrate why did Krillin decide to, after however many years of just always training, what specific thing was said to finally convince him, yeah, I don't have to do this anymore. um, but those are pretty much the three biggest ones. And then you have Goten and Trunks who uh, are Super Saiyans without even they're the first ones that just have it. We don't really get to see them before having it, so it's another one of those things where if they didn't skip so damn far in the future, maybe we could have actually seen them become Super Saiyans for the first time, or just not. Whatever. That's another issue. But I want to focus specifically on characters that were already introduced, um, and have some kind of like big change to the way they act or status quo, and it goes completely unexplained and is left up to our imagination. Like, oh yeah, in that 7 years, this happened and that happens. Like, okay, but how did it happen? Why did it happen? Like I remember one of the biggest issues of the overall Dragon Ball series is romance. I think Toriyama loves to just have these time skips explain away how people actually became attracted to each other. Like he's just so unconcerned about that. It's and again, I'm not saying you have to turn it into some extravagant affair, but I would like to know how Vegeta goes from just having a kid with this woman, and then it's like whatever, and then now is living with her. I would have liked to have seen what caused that to happen. But this is why I brought up this as an example, because in every time skip in the series before the Boo saga, it was always just so characters could train for some unspecified amount of time, or usually like a year, 3 years for this, just different amounts of time. And then we could believe, oh, look at how long they were training. They might actually have a chance of defeating this new antagonist. But with the Boo saga, it's like it was a different show. Like you're like you're missing two or three arcs or sagas in between that one. So that was my point. Hell, even with Super, like I don't even, like that show, but I'll readily admit that it doesn't its time skips aren't as bad as the one from the Boo saga. Like pretty much everyone, the way they act in the Boo saga, or the status they had in the Boo saga, is pretty much the same as it was throughout all of Super. Um, I guess now we can start discussing Young Justice. God, so here's the thing, right? Earlier this week, I rewatched all of season two. I hadn't seen season two since it ended back in 2013, I believe. When I was in like ninth grade or eighth grade. Yeah, so I rewatched season two. I watched season three, and I watched the first 5 episodes of season four, and then the sixth one came out today, actually. And I'm really contemplating making a video on that show. And the reason for that is because I've never seen a series that I was so in love with, right? When in its original season. Um, in such a short amount of time, really discourage me and make me not interested. Just like this 360 swerve. Because with Super, it was a gradual thing. It was like, all right, here are these two arcs that are just retellings of the movie, except they're stretched out and uglier looking. Because the animators for the show don't have the budget for a film, so they're just stretched out, uglier versions of what we already saw. So let me skip these two arcs and wait for the first tournament. And then the first tournament comes, Vegeta is actually looking as if he's going to beat the main antagonist of the arc for once, and then nope. And then Hit has some ridiculous fight with Goku, and I'm like, all right, whatever. So then Goku, the future Trunks arc starts. I'm like, all right, cool. This interesting premise, evil version of Goku, who I actually think is kind of cool. All right, and then they have this weird ending where Trunks defeats Zamasu or cuts him in half, and he turns in the clouds and blows up them. It's all kind of just levels of screwed up. A complete waste of time, right? So then we get to the Universe 6, the arc, the Universal Survival Saga. Like, oh, cool. They're going to use 10 characters from the original manga and actually seem to give them something to do. This is still not something I'm looking forward to because you guys have played with me too much. But I'm definitely gonna uh, have like a tiny glimmer of hope here. And then they sideline Boo again for like the third time in that show. And then they have like if you weren't Goku, Vegeta, Gohan, and then maybe 17 and then maybe 18, you didn't really get to do much in that tournament. And Roshi, I should say. I'm like, all right, whatever. They have it. They have 5, 6 people get to do something. That's still better than most arcs of that show. Uh, then they have the Broly movie. I'm like, oh, cool. They're gonna have like Broly meet Gohan and Goten and Trunks, and like the difference between Earth Saiyans and the ones that are from their planet. Oh no, okay. Well, so you see how it was a gradual thing where I just kept holding out hope for it to get better, and then it just kept not doing it. It's really the same thing with Young Justice. Um, but let me talk about the first season and just gush over it a little bit, and then we can get into the hate fest. So I really like the idea of taking, with the exception of Robin, right? These DC characters that barely got any attention from most forms of other media. Like they get development in comics because comics focus on pretty much everybody. But I really like the idea of taking these DC characters who, for the most part, are kind of obscure and doing a whole show based around them. I thought that was really cool. And I thought that they did a good job with the original 6 that they had. I could tell you something about each of their personalities, their powers, their dynamics with other members of the group. Um, in this 26 episodes that they had for season 1, they really developed those 6 characters, and they had some development of other ones too, like Red Arrow. You know, he gets extra points for being voiced by Crispin Freeman, so Itachi from Naruto. He's a very interesting kind of, I don't want to say anti-hero, but I like the dynamic of someone their age that's not part of their group that we still got to see regularly, and I liked his dynamic with Cheshire. And they did the same thing as far as someone who's not that part of that group of 6, but still gets some development with Satana, where we see the stuff that happens with her and her dad. Um, just I thought they did a good job. I figured that for season 2, because they introduced 2 more members of the main team by the end of season 1, that we're going to have we're going to have these 6 characters from the first season get more development, maybe not as much, but still more screen time because they're the protagonist, and we're going to have the other 2 also get some development. And I was really surprised they put Rocket on the team because I don't remember them using her in anything ever before that show, but I was really optimistic. So after season 1, they have a time skip of 5 years. And we got to keep restating this. A time skip by itself is not an issue. Like I said, Dragon Ball, or excuse me, Z, because I was mistaken for the original series. Z, I think yeah, the original had like multiple year time skips too, because I know the last tournament there's a 3 year time skip. But for the for Z, just as an example, the Cell Saga has what's basically a 4 year time skip where we get a year after Frieza, and then Trunks shows up, tells them about the androids, and then a 3 year time skip where they train. But notice that no character really, by the end of that 4 year time skip, so from the time that the Frieza saga ends to when the androids come to Earth, really has anything major happen to them or act differently, from how they start the, because we haven't spent that much time with anybody, and they're, the only real status quo type changing thing that happens with anyone in terms of personality or whatever situation they're in is Vegeta and Bulma having a kid, which doesn't affect the way that they act as characters. Vegeta still is this aloof person that is mostly keeping to himself. So again, having a multiple year time skip by itself is not the issue. The problem that season two of Young Justice has is that it takes most of the members from season one and takes them off the team, which is supposed to be like the main cast of the show, and it adds multiple new members so that if you're coming into season two after seeing season one, you have a reasonable expectation that the new characters that were added, there's going to be an attempt by the writer to give them some kind of development that is on par with the group from season one, because everyone that was on the team in season one, at least that was there from the start of the season to the end of it, got a lot of development. And out of this new group they introduced, the only one they really try to do things with is Blue Beetle, um, which begs the question of what was the purpose. And I saw one person who said, "Well, they added those other members on there because they were trying to show that the team had been, like the go-to for sidekicks, and they couldn't just have only a few more people join after." Like, but here's the thing: there were members that joined in between season one and two that were no longer on the team. So all they had to do was just, after having this time skip, if they wanted to focus on a core group of like 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 characters in 20 episodes, they could have just had maybe 2 or 3 new people be on there with the 3 that they kept from season one on there. And then say, oh yeah, these other members were there as well before, but they're all doing their own different stuff. That's a good way of writing them out with the opportunity to possibly bring them in later, so you can focus on the ones you already have. I'm telling you, people always have an excuse for everything. Like this is why I don't even like being, just in conversations with people about a lot of this stuff, because it's like they never want to admit when something they like has issues. Um, like you'll be really surprised by just the attempts that people have made toward defending this. And I've even seen some people who compare, like they tried to tell me, oh, season one has loads of characters. Well, I was like, yeah, but they also have a core focus of the, original 6 members that make up the group. Like they're all introduced in like the first 5, 6 episodes. They all have multiple episodes about them. Again, if you want, I can name all of their personalities and dynamics with each other. They're a very fleshed out group. Because again, 20 some episodes that focuses on 6 people can do a lot with them. Uh, and I think the same thing could be said for, just as an example of like shows having loads of characters. Naruto has plenty of characters. Anyone who's seen that series knows they have all these 3-man teams, all these different teachers, the different leaders of various villages and their respective members. But again, the big difference between Naruto and Young Justice is that Naruto has a very core focus on what character? Naruto. So even if I have problems with Shippuden, and I do, for taking characters like Rock Lee or Neji or anyone like that and just barely doing anything with them at all, I can still say, okay, the show is about Naruto. I don't see him disappearing for 10 episodes so they can focus on Kankuro or something. You know what I'm talking about. It's not the same, because no one is complaining about a narrative having loads of characters. But with pretty much any other series I've seen that has lots of characters, there's a core focus. And that was the point I was making about how with Young Justice season 2, if they wanted to have some big team, right? then they should have just focused on that big team, because when I have the six from season one all still coming back, and some of them in, just as prominent as they were in season one, and then the other members are also here and there, and then you have the team from that's introduced in season two, and sometimes there's episodes about that. I don't even know who the main character is anymore, because it's all these different characters, must be like 15 or 16 of them, all trying to compete for screen time. And it's funny. I was reading earlier this year Giant Size X-Men #1. So for a lot of people that aren't familiar with the history of the X-Men, the original five members were on the team for like 50 some issues, and then they get defeated with the exception of Cyclops, and then he goes to save them with Wolverine, Storm, Colossus, Nightcrawler, these other members, right? These new members. And at the end of the issue, they're like, well, what are we going to do with 13 X-Men? And so Claremont wrote out all of them except for Cyclops, and then he brought back Jean a short time later. And he wanted to keep her around initially, but it was, this show is like what would happen if Claremont was like, you know what, let's do it. Let's have an X-Men roster of 13 people. Because he got rid of them because he couldn't focus on them. And again, they all come back at various points, but the point I'm making is he removed most of those original members so he could focus on the ones he had brought in, and so that he wouldn't have this task of like trying to give attention to loads of characters who at the same time he's all saying are all important as each other because they're all members of the core group. So with Young Justice season 2, if I were to ever rewrite it, and I don't think I would, because it's just not something I particularly like to go back to that often. As I mentioned before, earlier this week is the first time I've seen it since it ended, or since it went off the air, referring to season 2. But I think if I were to rewrite it, I would have had it to where, because let me also just put this out there. Two of the members that joined the group at the end of season 1, they're both part of the Justice League by the time season 2 starts. And then the 3 other members that are not part of the team for season 2. Excuse me, I'm getting confused. Okay, so Miss Martian, Superboy, and Nightwing are on the team, and they're the holdouts from season 1. And then the other members are like all in these other things. So what I would have done is I would have kept those 3 that were on the team for season 2 like as they are, and then add Blue Beetle and maybe somebody else, like maybe 2 other people at most. So it would be 6 members, right? Just like it was during season 1. But then I would also have scenes that cut to Kid Flash and Artemis in school, maybe trying to stop villains, like while no longer, while technically being retired, to show that they're going to come out of it eventually. And I would also have, some stuff with Aqua. Basically, I think it could have worked if they still tried to keep that core focus on those 8 members from season 1 with like maybe 2, 3 more people. And then it would still, because, you've got 20 episodes. You don't have to have everybody in every episode. You can focus on like 4 or 3 different ones each one. So I think it could have worked. But they just added too many, and it felt like they didn't know entirely what they were going for, like who they wanted to use all the time. Yeah, that show is a really irritating one. Like, I discuss stuff like this because it helps me with writing. Like I've done a work with a time skip, and it's literally just everyone is the exact same as they were before, except like one person moves somewhere. Just that's why I said that time skips are not inherently a bad thing. They just have to not be used as an excuse to not actually develop characters. Now I'm going to give some examples, which again, I already warned you, there are spoilers in this video. Do not click it or do not watch this part if you don't want to be spoiled. So we find out that Aqualad has seemingly betrayed the team after the death of his of Tula, who was this character that he was in love with during season 1. And while this seems really cool, while it's based off of a dynamic that we saw a bit of during season 1, it's another issue with the time skip, because we only care about Tula because we know she meant something to Aqualad. When if there had been a season 2 that took place in between those 5 years, we could have actually seen the two of them interact together. What she was like while she was a member of the team, and then maybe what caused him to want to switch over to the other side. Like, was it immediate? What was the reaction of the group when this happened? How did these friends feel to believe that they were betrayed by him? Because we know that most of the members don't know that he's just an undercover agent. But see, that's an inherent problem of having a time skip and then using it as a basis to take a character and do something very drastic with them and then leave it up to our imagination as to how it all went down. And you know that the writers like have some basic idea that this was a major event because they made it the centerpiece of the Young Justice Legacy game. There was some game that they did that everybody said was horrible, but they only played it because it featured a story that's not actually in the show. You know what else that reminds me of? So X-Men 3 is called X-Men The Last Stand, if I remember correctly. And Nightcrawler isn't in it, but he's in the video game, and the video game explains like why he didn't join the X-Men. And like I remember this one guy did a review, he was like, no, I don't want to sit through a game, just tell me in the movie. But I said that, or I brought that example up because it's the same thing with Young Justice, where for me to understand what's going on, they wanted me to read like I think 5 issues of the tie-in comic, which got canceled basically a few months after they did the time skip. And they wanted me to play this game that everybody said was bad. But even if it was great, it's like, why do I have to engage with content that's not the show itself to fully know what's going on in the show? Because if Young Justice had a season 2 that featured Wally and Artemis retiring, and then it like showed them getting to that point. That had, Tula's demise and Aqualad like wanting to no longer be part of the team. And, in that same season, Nightwing, finally becomes Nightwing after being Robin. That would completely remove most of the lingering questions that I had between season 1 and season 2. And that's the biggest issue I have with season 2. It changes so much, along with the fact that it can't give a core focus to the people who have changed the most. So you're really left in the dark about a lot of things. And I always had this theory that Greg Weisman was upset about Gargoyles and Spectacular Spider-Man getting canceled prematurely or ending, prematurely. So he was like, all right, if I want to do these long-term grand things, let me make sure that I do them all in the next season, which will probably be my last one. Like he became so jaded from having his shows ended like abruptly that he just was like, all right, I'm gonna do these ideas. Time skip, here we come. Because I was reading an interview that was, I don't know if it was him, but it was someone that worked on the show and they were talking about season 4, and they were saying, yeah, Robin was Robin in season 1, and then he was Nightwing after that. If in most shows after 10 years, Robin would still be Robin. I'm like, well, you guys have only had 3 seasons. So if each season was like a year, like a lot of shows do, yeah, he would still be Robin. And I would have rather had 70 episodes of Robin before he as he gradually comes into his own and becomes Nightwing than Robin for 1 season and then, oh look, time skip, now he's Nightwing. Especially since they have Tim Drake in this show and they don't do anything. He doesn't get anywhere near the development or focus that Nightwing has or has had since the show began. He's a side character who's part of the main cast. It's him and Wonder Girl that frustrate me the most. Him because we haven't really seen him in any Batman related thing as like the centerpiece since the new Batman Adventures, where they basically made him like they gave him Jason Todd type stuff. And with Wonder Girl, it's irritating because she, like Wonder Woman's main cast never gets used in anything ever. So I was really excited at the prospect of her sidekick being a part of the crew, even though I would have preferred the Donna Troy version personally. But they just decided to take these characters, right, that they know a lot of people either like or recognize, they read comics, stick them in this show with no intent to develop them, and then we're supposed to be content. Oh, look how cool it is that Batman has Nightwing and Robin and Batgirl. It's like, yeah, but the only one of those four that actually got any development was Nightwing, and I guess Batman to an extent because we saw him regularly in season one. But it doesn't work for me because you don't spend enough time with them. Just like we see Barbara, which is Batgirl before she becomes Batgirl, during season one very briefly, and then big time skip. Now she's part of the team. It's like, well, why did she become Batgirl? What caused her to join the team? You know, what was that? Like they don't explain any of it. There's a tie-in comic that suggests that she and Nightwing had a relationship. It's like, yeah, it would have been nice to have seen how that happened. Because remember, this is the American writer crew. These people like actively had romances in season one. So instead of actually taking the time to develop a romance over multiple episodes or a whole season, or maybe even multiple seasons, along with whatever else is going on, they just say, "Well, time skip. This happened. Just trust us. It happened." What else did they do that irritated me? Oh yeah, and then with Impulse, they introduced the grandson of Barry Allen, and it's so weird because it's like you guys already have a team that has what 10 members, and then you're going to add another one. And that's another reason that like I was kind of pissed off with how they handled Wally after season one. Like you have him in almost every episode of season one, then he's in less than half of season two. And then like you introduce a new member of the Flash family and you barely let them interact with each other. I'm telling you, Wally could have had an amazing character arc after season one. They could have had him be a mentor, big brother figure for Bart. They could have shown us like what caused this really fast running kid from season one to kind of become more slowed down and just want to relax and retire and be with his woman. Like they really just botched it, in my opinion. Oh, I'm having a lot of fun talking to myself in this stream. Wow. It sucks because this is another one of those topics where I do wish people were here, but whatever. I guess everybody will just watch not replay the rerun of this. So that's really disappointing that people don't want to show up. I'm actually discussing something I find really interesting. I don't know what the deal is with schedules and all the rest of that. I just hope nobody comes on here. Why don't you do streams on stuff that's not romance? Like, well, when you see the response or lack thereof that we got from today, you can easily infer why that might be the case. Yeah, it's. Oh no, I just think YouTube in general is just a really frustrating site where people demand a lot out of you, and then they don't even do the most basic things in return. Like, if you want people to thumb up a video, they won't do it. If you want them to comment on a video, they won't do it. But please keep making content for us. So let me get to another character I want to mention, just as an example. I mean, I could bring up like with Wonder Girl, we don't see how she joined the team. Barely get to see her relationship with Wonder Woman, other than like one episode. But I mean, that still is just another example that's not even as offensive as the stuff they do with the ones from season one. Like I was really pissed off about Rocket being part of the league because we didn't get to know anything about her. She is part of the team for the season finale, and then no longer part of the team come the next season. And then during season two, they reveal that she's getting married, and they don't even tell us who the husband. It's just the joys of having too many characters, I guess. Too many characters and too many subplots with them. It's really sad. So Tana's really irritating because there's a lot of stuff they could have done with her. Like what's it like having a dad or possessed dad as part of the league. Did she make any attempt to remove the helmet during all that time? Just they really botched it with her, and I guess she's a little bit more frustrating because this is kind of so she was in the character of Satana was in BTAS, Batman the Animated Series, and then she was also in uh, Justice League Unlimited. But it's like this was the first time it looked as if she was going to be a main character in something, and they give her a few episodes during season one, which are some of the best ones of that season, and then now she's just part of the league along with 20 other people. And I know that Wiseman said that if there was more episodes of season two, they would have had one focused on her. But it's like, again, you're going to give her one episode to do something out of 20 something after she was supposedly promoted to main character status by the end of the previous season. Like, it's just, it's too little too late, basically. But anyways, when the show got canceled in 2013, I pretty much was like, whatever. And then, because I thought season one was really good. I thought season two was just too much ridiculous stuff. It had some good ideas, but they couldn't focus on anything in particular. Too many characters that they were just introducing over and over with no intention of actually developing them. It really was just like, I just thought it was bad. So when it got canceled, I didn't really feel anything other than sadness for the first season. Like what would have happened if they made a second one that was just right after the first one, like any other DC show. But then, 3 years passed. They announced they're going to do a third season, and at this time, I'm actually kind of surprised because I would prefer it if they had brought back what was the other one, Green Lantern, the animated series, because that actually had a fairly small cast, and I was really excited to see what would happen after the season one finale. And it's the only time Green Lantern's ever had his own show, and it got canceled for the stupidest reason on planet Earth. Toy sales for a movie that had nothing to do, whatever, just dumb stuff. But I was cautiously, I don't want to say optimistic because that's how I am about season four. But I was thinking maybe I was too harsh on the show because maybe if they get a third season, they won't introduce any new characters or very few new characters, and they'll focus on the ones that they didn't do much with during the second season. Basically, they'll take that cast, that status quo of season two, and just have another 20 some episodes of it to develop more characters and building the plots they had there instead of introducing more stuff. Nope. We've got Halo, Forager, Terra, and then all the ones from season two that actually got something to do, they just completely throw to the wayside. So like Blue Beetle, I mentioned, he's in like every episode of season two besides maybe two of them. One of the few characters introduced after season one that the show really focuses on. I don't even think he's in half of this season of season three. That is, it's like, wow. So season two was like his day in the limelight, and then they just tossed him aside. And again, this would be cool if it was like one of the league members, somebody that's not on the team, but he's supposed to be part of the main cast. Like, you guys gave all that focus to him just to do nothing with him the next season other than have him say a couple of lines and show up every handful of episodes. It was crazy. They did the same thing with Bart, or I guess he goes by, I don't want to say what his name is because it's a spoiler, but they did the same thing with him. With pretty much everyone that was introduced in season two got even less attention and less development than they did during season two. Like the season that was already bad for not focusing on the new characters introduced, except for one, made like they just doubled down on that. Here's some more new characters. We're gonna do a little bit of stuff with the original, six, and then that's gonna be it. We're just gonna keep introducing more people, some stuff with the original six. And it's just going to be this never-ending circle of, I can't wait until this person gets developed at last. Dude, I'd say the first half of season three is way better than the second half. But it's the same issue where, like, 2-year time skip, new members, just too many plots. And I don't even really want to talk about that much. I guess the only one from season two that they actually try to, but I still don't know if he counts because he's technically introduced in season one. Beast Boy, where they actually do have an episode or episodes based around him, where they like he shows up somewhat consistently. But outside of that, nobody else that has like a prominent role during season two really gets to do anything in three. So they just doubled down on it. Did it just start? What just start? If you're asking about the stream, they should tell you what amount of time I've been going for with no comments. We're trying to set a record of like nobody says anything. Everyone's just a mime at this point. They're like this. I just really was worried about saying spoilery type things because I don't think the time skips are a spoiler because if you go on YouTube, you can just find clips of like, oh, here's Robin from season one, here's Nightwing from season two. Oh, it's the same person. So I didn't feel bad about mentioning that. No, I'd say season three is easily the worst. Like as much as two really feels like it's just actually season six in disguise, right? I still would rather watch that than go and rewatch three. Like it's shorter. It doesn't have as many characters. Still has way too many to focus on. But just I think it's just gradually. Like I'd give season one an 8, a 9, or 10 out of 10. I have very little problems with it. I give two probably a 5 or a 6, and then I give three probably a 4. It's just this show. It's like it wants to be the DC universe, the animated series, like every DC character has to be in the show. But what's the point of getting excited about seeing a character who the writers do nothing with? I've been waiting for Zatanna to actually get some development past season one for what 8 years, 9 years. That's one of the reasons I didn't get excited for three because I knew that they were going to do the same thing to her they did during season two, where she might show up maybe a few times. There might be one episode where she gets to actually do stuff, but it's just more like supporting character stuff. No, Dio, that show. If you want to understand its full plot, you have to read a comic. Even though most people don't read comics, that's a fact. And you have to play the horrible video game, the Young Justice Legacy, to know like what happened between one and two, season one and two. DC don't care unless it's a bat. Hell, I wish they felt that way about his whole family. Like the show does a pretty decent job with Nightwing, like with Dick Grayson, but they really botched Tim Drake. Like they take Jason Todd, right? And they just time skip over his existence. Like, oh yeah, he was part of the team and then he got killed. Like, okay, sure, whatever. Um, and then you have Tim Drake, and then he doesn't. I literally can't think of one episode focusing on him throughout the whole like last two seasons of this show. And it really sucks because that's easily the most prominent, or at least he was before everybody got a Damien fetish. He was the most prominent Robin besides the original for decades. Like I don't. Basically, there's a reason why in the DC animated universe they skipped over Jason Todd and went to Tim because everybody liked Tim. What's so hard about putting the information in the actual show? Shaking my head. Well, that's why I said the other DC shows are superior. Like for Batman the animated series, you didn't have to read comics to know what was going on. The episode told you. With Justice League, you just watched the show. You didn't have to read any comics. That's why I said the show has too much going on to where major things that happen with characters, they won't even show it to us anymore. Like they have Aqualad lose the love of his life and seemingly betray his friends in between season one and two, and all of this happened off screen. This show was literally like the precursor to Avengers Endgame, where they have some massive time skip where a whole bunch of characters act differently or have had some huge development occur, and it's off screen and we just have to speculate as to what might have happened. They can't show it to us because they don't have enough time, so they just say, oh yeah, this happened. Just take our word for it. And I like that comparison. This show season one is like great, right? Season two is the prequel to Avengers Endgame. I still would rather take Endgame over that over Young Justice season two, because guess what it doesn't do? Introduce six, seven, eight new Avengers and then barely do anything with them except for one. They had six main characters, right? And then with two new ones possibly at the end of the season. They take the two newest ones and they have them join the league, so they're just like written off and like barely in the show after the few episodes where they were on the main team. They take two of the members from the previous season, Artemis and Wally, and have them retire and just not even barely be in the show uh, for a good chunk of it. And then they have one of them seemingly become a villain and just completely skip over his character arc. Just have all of this development he had, all this grief and the anguish, all took place off screen. And then they have the three members that stay, and one of them has gone from being a sidekick to his own man, and this development happened again off screen. One of the people that joined during season two was I tried watching season four of Young Justice. It was difficult. You know what? I was actually going to end this stream on a positive note by saying that I just watched like all of the. It's not all out yet. I know it's like really early in, but I watched like the first five episodes of season four back to back. I thought it was pretty good as far as like it has a clear focus and there's not 50 characters running around. Like the first four episodes are about Beast Boy, Miss Martian, and Superboy, right? And then the next four are going to be about Artemis and then maybe Cheshire or whatever her sister. I thought it was decent. Like it, you know, the biggest issue I have with this show is that it took its season one cast and basically did very little with them or didn't give them enough time in comparison with other ones they kept introducing. Um, and the tagline of season four is it's going to double down on the season one characters. That's why in the intro it has Rocket and Zatanna, who've been recurring and minor characters for the majority of this show at this point. So if they actually give those two like multiple episodes to do something, get development, I'll say this is the best season since season one easily. So I'm gonna have to disagree with you on that, buddy. If they actually stick the landing with this and just focus on the ones from season one, maybe throw in a season two or three person here or there, but it's mostly about that season one group and giving them like focus and attention at last again, or in some cases at last if it's Rocket and Zatanna. I'll be content with that. No, season four is I'm cautiously optimistic. Because it doesn't look like what's funny? Somebody actually said this show is like a DC play we call it like a toy box. Like it's this show is the equivalent of if a child had 200 action figures of DC comic characters and he's like always playing with the same 10, 15, and he's like, oh yeah, I'm gonna play with the other 185 at some point. But let's just keep getting more of them that we're just gonna not actually do anything with. Let's just have them just laying on the floor everywhere. No, I have to really disagree with you about season four. If they actually do what they said they're gonna do, I'll be a happy man, or I'll be a more content one than I've been with this show in a while. The two episodes I watched, it looked like they cut the budget drastic. Dude, season three is literally the prime example of that. Just don't even play with me about like you know that once they got off of Cartoon Network, the budget went down. But I'm not an art critic, so if you give me a good story, I don't really care. Once they didn't have their CN budget, they were like, all right, we're just gonna drop everything. You know what the other issue is though, right? A lot of cartoons that have these like really detailed character models um, tend to have those type of problems because the animators have to stick very strictly to a character model. So it's harder for them to make things move and for it just be organic. So for example, there was an Avengers cartoon. It's not Earth's Mightiest Heroes. It's the one that came out after. It's called Avengers Assemble, I think, where one of the animators from that show was talking about how hard it was to make it because they're with these character models and having like to be so rigidly accurate to that original drawing. It's difficult to animate this stuff. It was the same thing with the Legend of Korra, where they had difficulty making her hair move and all the rest of that. So they redesigned her for season 4 and gave her a different hairstyle. It's just like animation has become very difficult for a lot of studios to do. But I was going to say, that's one of the reasons why with a lot of modern like this type of issue, if they brought back Green Lantern, the animated series, which in my opinion was the better show of the two, like it actually had like a small group that it focused on. I knew everybody, just like with season 1 of this show. You wouldn't have that issue because they have CGI models that they don't have to keep drawing over and over that are always going to look the same no matter what angle you put them from. Dude, the Green Lantern show was amazing. That was God, that's one that along with like was it Spectacular Spider-Man? Like those two are my two comic book shows that I'm so angry about only having 1 season or 2 seasons. Cut way too short. Yeah. And like in 1 season, look at how much they did. They had the blue lanterns, the red lanterns, the orange lantern, Larfleeze. And again, they actually like they didn't have that show, if it was brought back, would not have the same issues that Young Justice has because animation with CGI or animating with CGI is nowhere near as constricting as 2D animation. Those models, once you make them, that's it. The most you have to do is maybe make it a little darker or whatever. But once you make the model, you don't have to worry about some of the issues that come with drawing this stuff over and over. Yeah, it was really good. It's in my top 5 DC shows. Like I'd say of the things that are not related to the DCAU, so like Batman, the animated series, Batman Beyond, Justice League. It's probably my favorite one, like of any DC related show that's not in that universe. So I'd strongly recommend it. I recommend the first season of Young Justice too, because it actually had a core group of characters that it focused on, that it gave development to. Well, I never thought Hal Jordan was boring. I think with him, the problem is most of the time he's featured in Justice League stuff where, like, you're not going to find him more interesting than Batman or Superman, most likely. But you could say every like hero that's not, you know, Batman is boring. Like I've seen people call um, Superman boring, right? Oh, he's Boy Scout, whatever. They say so. I'm not shocked that that would be like a conclusion people that don't read comics would come to. I've seen people that are like, I wonder if in Young Justice season 4 or 5 we're gonna get Supergirl. I'm like, for what? They're gonna introduce her. She's gonna be in like 2 episodes, and then she's gonna sit in the background for the rest of the damn show like everybody else. I told you, like, this is like people always talk about how fans ruin shows because the writers start listening to them. That's what it really feels like with this series, where people don't actually care about. Um, well, Green Arrow is good in everything. Like he's good in Young Justice too. The problem, see, during season 2, they have this plot where Roy finds the real Roy, like the clone finds the real one, and the clone is upset with Green Arrow, like he's mad that he just gave up on looking for him. And you would think, oh man, there's going to be some interesting arc where now Green Arrow is going to have to like try to reconcile and deal with having like the clone and the original, and they just completely drop it. Like he every portrayal of that character, like between Unlimited and Young Justice, is good. And in the case of Young Justice, which has more episodes but way more characters, they just don't do anything with him, even when the narrative would suggest or indicate that that would be the case. That could have been such an interesting plot, man. Like, imagine him like just searching constantly and trying to get the approval of his sidekick that he gave up on looking for because he thought he was dead, and doing everything in his power to try and convince him, I cared about you. Just like it, that would have been so much more interesting than just like, oh, here's a few episodes about it, and then. But again, that goes back to my thing about the show having too many to focus on. Because Red Arrow was a pretty consistent part of season one, so it would have made a lot of sense for that. And it's such a frustrating show because it has a lot of good ideas that it just doesn't give enough time. One, because it likes to skip over stuff. Two, because it enjoys just introducing more and more characters that it has no intention of actually doing anything with. I can't wait till Raven and Starfire show up. Yeah, so they can be in like 2 episodes and then join the team and not have any development. Yay. I'm telling you, every time I see people wanting things for this show, they're always speculating what new character will pop. I'm like, man, to hell with that. We have characters we've been seeing since season one who we barely know anything about. You know what I mean? Like, why keep introducing characters? Like, this show has so many villains. It has so many heroes. Do something with the ones you already have. If they wanted to, like, I'm not the writer on this show, but I guarantee you, I could do a solid 2, 3, 4 seasons with no new characters. Like, it would just be the ones they've already, because they have. I lost count, but you get the idea. They have so many characters they could just fully make the rest of the show just about the ones they already have. Like with Dragon Ball, you always have to like introduce a new villain because they always kill off the villain. So that would be the only reason to keep making new ones. But with Young Justice, they have so many villains they've introduced, and like they might be in one episode and get like a scene here or there. It really sucks. Can't wait till you make it big. Yeah, I gave up on that fairy tale a long time ago, but thanks. No, this website will drive you insane if you actually try to make it on here. People tell you they want you to do a video, then when you make the video, they don't watch it. I'm good. 1 second. Actually, no, I have to mute it. I'm just going to the closest thing. Oh. Oh. Where did Dio go? Did he vanish? Did he get mad because I said I didn't want any new characters in his favorite show? The show that focuses and develops everyone that they introduce. Like I said, series can have loads of characters, but if they don't have a consistent focus, it's goofy. Like, imagine if the MCU was like this. You have Iron Man, right? And then the next movie is Hulk, which it was. And then the next movie is Iron Man 2, but then the main character is, I don't know, the villain, right? And like maybe Tony has 10 minutes of screen time in the whole movie. You'd be like, what the hell? Because your expectation from watching the first one was that you would have the same character that was in the first one that had a prominent role have a prominent role in the second one. No, I don't watch that. Hey, Dio, imagine if the MCU was like this show where like they always have some different. Like if there's a sequel to a movie, it takes someone that was like a little like had nothing. How do I explain it? If you were prominent in the first one, you have less to do in the second one, and then you're like non-existent in the third one. It just keeps introducing more and more. This show is just. It really feels like someone had like a desire. They're like, let me see how many characters I can stick into this show. It's like, oh, are you actually gonna develop them? No. No, that time skip after season one was insane. I remember like because By the way, I've never seen a show other than this one where they like, some shows will take like a 2 week hiatus, a month-long hiatus, months-long hiatus for another season to start. This show took one, like, season one ended and then season two started the week after that. And I remember we were getting like pictures of Robin and then like short hair Miss Martian, and people were like, "Oh, Robin got a haircut." It's like, no, that's a different one. But it was funny because they we didn't like see how to explain it because to my knowledge, yeah, Artemis and Kid Flash don't show up in season two until after a couple of episodes. But like I remember, you know what, Dio, it still isn't the same thing because man, I don't even like bringing up Dragon Ball because I don't believe in main character with that show. But um, like you look at Z, Gohan has a big role in every arc. Well, Dio, I don't know what turning into Krillin means because Krillin was a major part of the entire original manga, other than the Buu saga. Like him and Gohan literally saved Goku after he runs out of stamina against Vegeta and is laying there like a corpse, getting strangled by the Great Ape form. And hell, Krillin and Gohan both have, and Vegeta all have way more screen time during the Frieza saga than Goku. All Goku does is lay up in a spaceship and train, beat a couple of members of the Ginyu Force, get his body stolen, and then it's up to Gohan and Krillin to save him again, and then lay up in the little healing chamber. To yeah, Yamcha is actually way less prominent because he's not even in the Frieza saga other than like 3 episodes, like just on the King Kai's planet. But no, I think that was not that good of a comparison because the Young Justice didn't really have a main character. It had 6 leads that it focused on and gave more attention than anybody else. So I don't think saying, oh yeah, here's this other show where it has one lead is as good of an example. We had this conversation last Saturday when I was talking about all that BS with that No Way Home stuff, where people are making fake posters and sticking them in movie theaters and on the back of buses, trying to get people all excited. I'm like, isn't it sad when you're like so gung ho about making people think 2 actors that are not that are like the official that are officially claimed to not be in this movie or in the movie that you have to like make fake stuff for them in it. I'm telling you, Kid Flash was in literally every episode of season one other than 2, and then he's not even in half of season 2. I was like, what kind of drop off is that? I'm trying to think who's the worst offender of that because Rocket's a really good example of just like what was the point? Like what was the point of having her join in the season one finale and then season two starts and she's no longer a member of the group that for us she literally joined not even 3 weeks ago. You know what I mean? Like what was the purpose of that? Because they don't do anything with her after she leaves. Like there are there's no episode focusing on her. That's why I said the only thing that she did during season two was show up in the premiere and speak to the members of the team that could join the league but were choosing not to, and then get married to somebody that we still don't know who the identity of that person was 2 seasons later. That's how important she is to this show. No, but Dio, when you're talking about like the animation budget went down, I'm telling you, if they brought back the Green Lantern series, that you wouldn't even imagine that because that's why so many people have gone to using CGI now. Because a lot of these studios have these really strict character models that are with a bunch of details that make it difficult for animators to use. Yeah, Akatsuki Merchant. We're just talking about Young Justice, its time skips, and all the different like plots and ideas that it just skims over to get from point A to point C or D. No, but even with Robin, it's like you introduce him during season one. He's the youngest member, but the most experienced one. You you have this like really interesting dynamic between him and Kid Flash, and then all of a sudden there's a time skip to season two, and now he's Nightwing, and we never get to see like what caused him to give up being Robin. Um, if he had the fallout with Bruce that many other iterations of Nightwing have had. Again, they decide to forego character development by using an off-screen excuse like, oh, this happened just during the time skip, you weren't there for it, but trust us, it happened. Yeah, they can reuse models. No, that's why animation, 2D animation is dying. It's getting used less and less. Like if your show isn't from Japan, uh you're gonna find yourself in 3D after a while. But that was the reason why they redesigned the Legend of Korra characters for the last season. Like they specifically why they redesigned Korra, because she had the little hair that you have to make move over and over, and the ponytail in the back. They're like, no, so they just gave her the short hairstyle, and they tried to say, oh, we're just switching things up. But no, the real reason is because they got tired of having to keep making that stuff move, so they just did something simpler. DC writers abused the hell out of time traveling and really warping Marvel writers like Chris Claremont to use these mechanics to push a story after the. Don't you dare bring up Chris Claremont. That man revolutionized the X-Men. That's one of the best comic writers of all time. I can't think of any other comic writer besides maybe Stan Lee, and even that's kind of limited, where had multiple stories turned into movies, especially when it didn't even make the damn team. Narcotsky Merchant is trying to have an internet brawl with me. You're going to disparage Chris Claremont. The longest running X-Men writer ever. I wish I could say the longest running Spider-Man writer was as good as he is, but and Slott is garbage, so we've already been over that. But no, we weren't even talking about DC writers. We were talking about the time skips in Young Justice. Like DC Comics don't have these time skips because they have the floating timeline where everything just stays in the same year, right? So we actually get to see all the major developments happen in the comic versus, oh, here's a time skip. Now this person has a baby. And I was actually contrasting how Dragon Ball had a lot of time skips, but outside of the Buu saga in the original manga, right? They were only used for characters to train for a while. And then when they would come back, we would believe they were much stronger because of how long they had trained. It's the same thing in One Piece. You have a 2-year time skip for the individual 9 members of the crew to train. And it's like, yes, some stuff happens, during this period, but it's not concerning any of the major characters, and it's nothing that we can't possibly be shown. Pretty much everyone that was part of the main cast at that point, they act the same way they did at the end, before the time skip, they do after the time skip. Like all the major character developing stuff has happened on like in front of us as the viewer or the reader. And yeah, you're right. The authors of Legend of Korra specifically said they changed up her style because it cut down animation production time. Exactly. Remember, during season 4, they had to make a stupid clip show episode or risk a bunch of people getting fired. I hate clip show episodes so much. Hey, remember that time that thing happened? And then it's like, oh, flashback. The laziest. I'm glad people didn't get fired, but I just hate those so much because like I already saw this. Whatever. It's just funny because I remember Transformers Prime. That's the Transformers show that came out in 2010, the CGI one. Well, one of the CGI ones, I should say. I remember during season two, their season two is 26 episodes, and they had two clip shows. They had one where it's like Agent Fowler, that's the like the main cop of the show or whatever. He's like talking about the Autobots and their personalities, and it's showing different clips from season one and Star season two. And then there's another clip show where it's like Starscream and Megatron, and they're talking about his betrayals and stuff. And I'm like, why? Why do we have? And one of them actually does move the story forward, admittedly, but two clip show episodes in one season. I do feel bad for the people that made that show when you find out behind the scenes that they had ideas for 4 years of TV and they only got to use 1 year before Hasbro told them to use everything for two, three, and four in one season. You know, that was really douchebag behavior, but whatever. Um, but yeah, Kotsky Merchant, we were talking about how the time skips in Young Justice, along with the introduction of more and more and more and more and more and more characters, makes it to where the show is this overcrowded toy box like mess that you where you can't get attached to anyone because they don't have a specific set of people that they consistently focus on. They also said they made a conscious decision to change up the bending style in the show because they wanted to show how much the art of bending has changed since Korra became Avatar. Yeah, I guess, man. I'm just that's not a show I'm exactly looking forward to rewatching anytime soon. Like I think the original, The Last Airbender, the show, not the stupid movie, was classic, but Korra after season one really starts to take a nosedive for me personally, but whatever. At least that show doesn't have was it 10, 20, 30 new characters introduced every season and then they only focus on like two of them. I'm telling you, man, this is like the only thing Shonen does better than us. Like they have a main protagonist or some main group of people. They stick with them from the start to the. I stopped watching after season two. You're really not missing much. Season three did the exact same thing to the ones introduced during season two, where the ones introduced during that season get even less attention than they did in season two, which was already bare bones to begin with. And they have this weird like social media arc where Beast Boy is like trending online. I'm like, what the hell? But like I said, I am cautiously optimistic for season four because I watched the first six episodes and they do have like a clear focus on different members that they give a little arc to, and they did say that it's going to focus on the team from season one. So I really hope they stick the landing and actually do that. Because they said the ninth episode, you know those little episode like synopsis they put out before it comes out. The ninth one's about Satana, and she hasn't had an episode about her pretty much since season one. So I really hope they actually do it. She was getting beat up way too much for someone who learned three forms of bending by the time she was a toddler. Right. Well, it's just like Superman and Justice League. It's like, oh, look at how strong our villain is as they beat up the character who's supposed to be very powerful. That's a running gag in shows called the Worf Effect, where there's like a character who's supposed to be strong, and all they do is get beat up by everybody to show how strong the villain is. Like when the Constructicons, when they first formed Devastator, oh my god, what are we gonna do? And then they get so weak by the end of it that someone just like hits them like someone into pieces. I really hope season four actually focuses on that group of seven from the first season. They got them in the intro. I really hope they're not screwing with me again. Hey, this is gonna be just like when with Super, I told you how I was so excited when the Universe Six tournament got announced because they had Boo and Piccolo on the poster. I was like, oh my god, they're actually gonna let Piccolo and Boo have some fights. This is gonna be so great. And then all they do is have Boo go to sleep before the actual tournament starts, and have Piccolo get his butt whooped by some cheating Frieza clone who then like gets to fight Vegeta even though they found out he was cheating and that's the only reason he beat Piccolo. Oh my god, what a bunch of douchebags. You know that's screwed up. I don't care what anybody says. That tournament was, if you weren't Vegeta, they didn't do you well. If you weren't Vegeta or Goku, I should say, because even Vegeta, they haven't beat three people back to back and then lose to the final guy because he can never defeat the main antagonist of an arc ever. These damn time skips. Hell, even the time skip in Naruto isn't bad because all that happens in that time is that the kids that were Naruto's age become all like they all become Chunins, which I mean doesn't exactly mean any major thing for the story of Shippuden. But you get my point that pretty much like nothing big really happens in that 2 year time skip. You know, that's why I said that you can have little stuff happen, like little events, but like the core focus characters don't really change that much or have any major thing happen to them. It's just a passage of time for them to do training. I stopped watching after season 2. Oh, you know what? I just realized you were talking about Legend of Korra. I thought you were talking about Young Justice. They both have 4 seasons. Dude, Korra's the only show I've ever seen that was so bad it got pulled off the air and started having new episodes premiere on the internet. I've never seen that before. Where they're like, nope. See? I've never seen a show besides that one get pulled off TV and then just start airing episodes on the internet. New episodes, like, all right, here you go. I thought that was hilarious. No, that show is just really goofy. Yeah, it was so bad that viewership for the original Avatar has increased as a response. Yeah, because the original one was a much better show. I talked about some of the stuff that happened behind the scenes with the original, how they were told they had 4 seasons, and then when they got to the third one, Nickelodeon was like, "All right, well, we're only giving you a third one." So then they had to squeeze all their ideas for 3 and 4 into one season, and then after they finished their story, oh, here's some more episodes. It's like we just finished the show, you idiots. So yeah, I talked about how that was just one of the and then apparently they one of the other reasons for no season 4 was because they were working on that horrible movie. Like we traded a 4th season of the classic show for a garbage film that is literally considered one of the worst movies ever made. Just imagine that. We traded a 4th season that could have shown us what the Fire Nation looked like with a new leader who was had views that were like conflicting with members of his own nation, and maybe like have different people rebel and possibly have a plot where he has to stop these people who are like trying to still have conflict with other nations, and then maybe see like what Aang was trying to do to rebuild the air temples and whatnot. We traded all of that for a stupid movie that mispronounced the characters' names, condensed the 1st season, cut out a whole bunch of. I don't. I just that's so sad. Whatever. It's the same thing with the Green Lantern shows like that. That show didn't get canceled because it was boring or whatever. It got canceled because toys for a movie that it had nothing to do with were still on shelves 2 years after the movie came out. Yeah, I really like the original. I'd say it's funny. I think season two is probably the most solid for me because when I was a kid, I used to think, oh my god, season three is so amazing. But now it's like, well, Iroh's barely in it, and he's like a major part of the first two seasons. They don't really give Toph anything to do after season two, other than that one episode where her and Katara are arguing with each other. It's really interesting because like my mind now kind of just scans through it. It's like, wow, they really kind of take two of the characters that are the best in the show, Toph and Iroh, and kind of barely do anything with them for a whole last third of the series. That's only something I just now realized, just like as an adult, when I was just thinking, like, yeah, that makes season one look a lot better. Because I always did like season one. Um, like I've only it's only when I came online and people were doing their little reviews that they would like suck off the latter two seasons and act like the first one wasn't that good, even though it was. Um, but yeah, Young Justice was a hot mess, and it's really sad because I can still go back to the first season and enjoy it. You know, the first season I can still watch and completely the same way I did when it came out back when I was in I think sixth or seventh grade. I still say first season is great. It's got six characters that it gives enough development to and focus to for a person to know what their personality is, their motivations, and like them. And after that, it seems like they were more interested in sticking in more plots and characters versus actually developing any one character or plot. So yeah, it's a hot mess, but only after season one. I think season one is great. It's if this show was just another one season show that got canceled after a year, like a bunch of other stuff, unfortunately, it would probably be in my top. I'd say at least top 10 comic book shows because I really like the idea of taking these minor characters, with the exception of Robin, these like side characters, sidekicks, whatever, and making them the primary focus of a cartoon. Especially when you know that DC has like a weird hate boner for using sidekicks in other media, especially films. Like, there's a reason why you haven't seen Robin in the Batman movie in like what 20 years, almost 30 since Batman and Robin. I remember this one time I asked my best friend, "Do you like Supergirl?" And he was like, "Oh, I like Superboy." I'm like, "Yeah, but," because he knows who Superboy is because he saw Young Justice when he was a kid. I'm like, "Well, I guess I do as well, but Supergirl's been around way longer." That's kind of like if I asked them if they like Gohan, they're like, "I like Goten." It's like, okay, but one's been around. Actually, I take that back because I guess theoretically, no, that still is a pretty decent comparison because Gohan's around for all of Z and Goten only is around for the last arc. So you get the idea. Unalaq was the cheesiest villain I've ever seen. I think the only villain in that show I really wanted to see more of or just have any fondness for was Amon. Because I did like the idea of someone, that wears a mask and is like, and he was voiced by Steve Bloom, who's great in everything. Because you've seen Naruto Akatsuki Merchant, so you know Steve Bloom gets around, his voice is everywhere. Dark Avatar, get out of here. The idea of an avatar being evil actually would be like make for an interesting like concept. Like the one person who can do all the elements is a villain. Just for like one show I think that would be interesting. Hey, one of the things that really pissed me off is that at the end of season 2 of that show, they cut the connection to all the past avatars, which means that if they ever did another show where, like, let's say it's an Earthbender that's the avatar, they can only interact with Korra. It's like that is so lame. Because they don't use the other avatars ever in anything pretty much. So we can't get any more cameos. We can't get any more like. I just thought that whole 2 episodes that was about the first one that won. I was like, get rid of that. If you gave me 2 episodes about Roku, about Kiyoshi, okay, whatever, about Aang, I would have been way more interested than this random guy that they want to explain the or. It's just I was good. I was interested. It's not even just like a thing we gradually learn, or like 1 episode, 2 whole episodes of this random character that's never going to show up again in anything. I remember Dio. There were these old Avatar trading cards that had like an evil Airbender. I thought that was the coolest thing ever, where he was like working for the Fire Nation to try and find Aang before, which of course they were never going to because he was sealed up in the, inside of that glacier that he made. But I thought that was funny, like not funny, but I thought that was like a really cool idea, like this evil Airbender, because of the fact that we saw very, very little of them compared to the Water tribe and the Earth Kingdom. They're kind of like considered the saints of the Avatar world. Like we just assumed they were all good people. I mean, like Fire Nation just got associated with being villains. So I would like it if we got some evil members of other, and we did technically get that during the original series. But you know what I'm saying? It's just I don't think we've ever had in an official, in like either show, an evil Airbender. It was stupid that they took away this one thing that made the Avatar unique title. No, you love Legend of Korra. You want there to be a 5th season. By the way, my favorite thing about the end of that show was how they're like, "Oh my God, look at this." I don't even like saying that word, but just look at this gay relationship between Korra and Asami. LGBT representation. It's like all they did was hold hands. Like, how is this brave? You know what I mean? Like, you have these 2 characters who didn't even like each other when the show started, who barely interacted during season 2. All of a sudden, they're with each other a lot during season 3, and now at the end of season 4, they're a couple, which is only confirmed by them holding hands. So if you hold hands with somebody, you're their boyfriend. So if you see some lady at the market, and you go up to her and you hold her hand, she's now magically your girlfriend. But what really got me about that is like they wanted to make it sound so brave, right? That this show had the first LGBT pairing and a kid. It's like it's not brave. You guys are being like pussies because you literally only have them show supposed romantic interest into them 2 seconds before the show is over. And then all the actual like gay stuff that they do, or I guess like real romantic. I'm talking about, like stuff that demonstrates that it's 2 women attracted to each other, is in the comics that people don't even read for the most part anyway. Don't ever hold hands with a woman, or else you're gonna magically be her boyfriend. Because remember, when you hold hands with somebody, it creates this trance. If you're holding an old lady's hand across the street, then that's why I gave the example of like you see some hot lady, it's like, oh, let me hold your hand. Oh, now we're a couple. Now you have to divorce your husband. The Avatar state wasn't this big power. It's supposed to be a state in which the Avatar drew knowledge from past lives, make their bending more potent. I don't even remember Korra even interacting with any of the past Avatars other than Aang for like 2 seconds during the season 1 finale. That was a really missed opportunity. We could have got so much more development out, because we still barely know anything about even with Aang, we only really know bare minimum stuff about his life in like those last 20, 30 years of his life. So that was another missed opportunity. Maybe if we're lucky, the comics will eventually get to that in like 2050 at the rate they're going. That's crazy. They actually could make like an Avatar: The Last Airbender like monthly comic and just have it go for like 300, 400, 500 issues, like every 12 issues is a year or something, or every, what I'm talking about. Like they have enough story ideas, I'm sure, to where they could just like map all this stuff out and just keep it going for a long time and keep like using different characters, and it would be so, that would have been amazing, instead of this like it's a graphic novel trilogy, and it's whatever. But the Avatar state wasn't even supposed to be what it is in Korra, where it's like Aang would only use it if he was in extreme emotional stress, or like on the danger of being killed, or like when he got angry about Appa being kidnapped, or when he was like struggling to fight Zuko and Azula, and before she killed him. It's like in Korra, they have her summon it manually, so now every time she uses it, it has to have end with her being defeated. Like it's the form has literally lost its meaning. It's just a stupid power up that if it was used the way it was in the first series, she would beat everybody. Now, the Avatar state was handled so much better in the original than in Korra. I remember when I was a kid, like that season 2 finale where he summons it and Katara's smiling and Azula just zaps him in the back. That was like so sad, just as a conclusion. Like in most shows, like from what I've seen, okay, in a season finale, usually if the main character or main characters don't succeed, it's because maybe the villain took over somewhere else. Like you don't see the hero die like right in front of you. That was extremely dark for someone on Nickelodeon, because she killed him. The original Last Airbender, that show was great. All we know is that he was nearly killed by some bloodbender who could bloodbend without a full moon, which they never explained how Amon could do that. I still think out of any of the main antagonists from that show, Amon's probably the one I thought was the most interesting. That like I would have liked to have seen come back and still be involved after season 1. Like I said, that show is just it's a really frustrating series, because there's a lot of I don't know. I think the best things about Legend of Korra are probably like Tenzin and Lin, and it's like, isn't it sad that the characters who are literally the children of the previous more interesting protagonist are more interesting than your supposed main characters? Do imagine if they actually made like a spin-off show that was just about Tenzin after his dad dies, and like rebuilding the air temples, and being like isn't that like he inherited the title of the last airbender from his dad, and then maybe you could have like flashbacks of him as a kid with his dad, and because they mentioned that he was the one that spent the most time with him because he was the only airbender. I think that would be a lot more interesting than just, oh well, here's the next Avatar, yay. I remember when Korra was first announced, they were like, everyone who knew Aang is deceased except for Katara, and then we find out that Zuko and Toph are still alive. It's like, you lying bastards. I'm still mad that Sokka was deceased, because he was one of the best characters from the. I don't know why they didn't let him live. That's so stupid. Yeah, I agree. I think Amon could have been used as a catalyst for some interesting world building. I tell you, that's the biggest problem with these writers. They feel like the only way to be conclusive with the villain story is just kill them off. Toriyama had that issue. Kishimoto had that issue. Toyotaro has that issue. Um, just a lot of them do that. And it's funny because a lot of American comic writers avoid doing that, but these people just are really irritating. Hell, even with the original show, they didn't kill off Ozai. Didn't have to because the threat of him doing what he was planning on doing was stopping. He got his bending taken away. I wonder if an avatar used blood bending. I remember how that was just like a random technique that was in one episode. That's one of the reasons I think season one's the strongest, because that was just a random technique that showed up in one episode of season three. And then all of a sudden it's like a major plot point in season one of Korra. Remember, in the original show, we don't see bloodbending until the last season by a character who literally never pops up again. I remember that was like the pseudo Halloween episode of the original. Like that's the episode that had like the spooky atmosphere and like, man, what a good show. Another issue they have is that they think the only way to make the villain a visible threat is to make them beat down the protagonist regardless of the established skill of the protagonist. Well, yeah, because a lot of people make fun of shows where the villain gets defeated because they say it makes him look incompetent. So it's pretty much a damned if you do, damned if you don't. The villain's either too threatening or the hero's either too good, So you just can't win. I can't wait for Akatsuki Merchant to join the main cast of Young Justice in season 5 and get a bunch of either have like maybe 3 lines in 10 episodes or get a bunch of development during season 5 and then they don't do anything with him in season 6. I can't wait. That was funny when Dio was like the budget went. I was like, yeah, of course. What did you expect? This is why, like, no major studio by 2030 or 40, I fully believe 2D animation outside of Japan is going to be dead. Just give it a few more years. You're gonna just see just models because people are tired of having to stick to some really defined character model and having to draw it over and over again. And then it's like really stiff if it's accurate or it doesn't look like it. There are episodes of Shippuden that get made fun of for how horrible the characters look. Like I remember during the pain fight, and this isn't even a good example because it's from Japan, but during the pain fight, there's like a scene where his face, like somebody screenshot, he looks like a horse. One of the 6 paths that he had. True, the Halloween episode. That was a pretty scary episode. Like they're in a forest by themselves as a group talking about stuff, and then this old lady comes up and she looks like she's a nice person, and then you find out she's from the Water Tribe, and it's like her story is scary too. Like where she's, we see like the flashbacks of her blood bending. It's a very scary, like just in terms of being a standalone episode, it's pretty haunting. That saddens me. What saddens you? Oh, that 2D is over. Well, 2D is something that studios are realizing is very frustrating for animators and very limiting as well. Because like I said, when you make a CGI model, you can make it detailed. You can have little stuff on the shoulders, little hair moving around, and it makes itself move in a lot of cases. And you don't have to worry about how similar it is to something else. That's why I think Azula was a well-written villain, because her conclusive end was being defeated by her own brother and having a full-on mental breakdown because she couldn't stand losing to him. Yes, she's one of the more redeeming qualities of season 3, that she's like still in the story. But just season two by itself, it's like you have she's such a good parallel to her brother. She's his opposite in almost every way. Opposite in gender, in terms of her standing with her father, in terms of her being a prodigy while he had to struggle. Um, she is probably in the top five, I'd say, best characters of the show for me. Yeah, I think she's great. I really wish that they had like had her have a cameo maybe during Korra, like because we don't know what happens to like we obviously have comics that show that she was like trying to influence Zuko while he was the Fire Lord, but we still don't like really know what her conclusive end was. No, she was a great villain. That's why I was really frustrated that they barely used her friends during season three. And she's the only villain in the show who no, she killed him. Remember Katara's like the water's supposed to revive you? He was dead. You saw him fall out of the air and like almost hit the ground after that. I remember this one guy, like, okay, so everybody says Sonic 2006 is a horrible game, but a lot of people really like Memphis because he's the only villain that actually kills Sonic. Just like with Cell, a lot of people like Cell because outside of Piccolo, who Goku sacrificed himself, so it was like a purposeful thing. He's the only villain that actually killed Goku, and before Super did their alternate universe thing. So, uh, yeah, there's a lot of appeal to having an antagonist that takes out the protagonist or comes close or whatever. But she did kill him. The only reason he was alive after that was because of that one time use Deus Ex Machina water that Katara had. That's one of the reasons I wanted a season four of the original because they apparently she was going to have some redemption arc or there was going to be more focus on the character of Azula, and I would have liked to have seen that because we didn't even really get to see her and Iroh interact after season two. Because that was another thing where it's like both her and Zuko are disrespectful to their uncle, but um, Iroh is like someone that Zuko does care about because and it's always been established he loves him because during season one when Iroh is seemingly like captured or kidnapped, he is like looking for him and he could have left him behind if he wanted to. Um, so yeah, I really like the like I wish we could have seen more of that dynamic because they contrast each other so well. Like Azula is literally his opposite in every way, referring to Zuko. Yeah, you could say she killed him because she cut off his connection to. No, Akatsuki Merchant. You don't remember when they said that if the Avatar is mortally wounded in the Avatar state, the Avatar dies, and there will be no more Avatars after that. You remember? She did kill him. Now that lightning is nothing to mess around with. Yeah, she's easily the like her and Toph make that show so much better when they show up in season two. How are the 100% certain of that unless they've killed an avatar in avatar state? Because it's explained to Aang by that one. I'm forgetting that character's name, but he explains to him that that would happen. Like that's talked about by a figure of authority. Uh, dude, I haven't seen season two in a while. I don't remember who it was, but someone in authority mentions like if you die while in the Avatar state, that's it. Yeah, you're right because when Aang came back from his 2-year coma of the Earth Kingdom, thought he was dead, and Azula. No, he wasn't knocked out for 2 years. It was like a month or something. Let me go look on. I can look on the wiki later, but it's like a couple of weeks or a month. Yeah, Azula and Zuko both weren't entirely sure because they had a conversation where Azula is like, unless you know of something that could bring Aang back. And then Zuko remembers Katara talking about that water that she had. So yeah, Azula herself wasn't entirely sure that she succeeded, and that's why she said that Zuko killed him because if it was found out that Aang was still alive, Zuko would get the blame for being incompetent and not, actually finishing him off. So she was a great villain and a very multi-layered character. She gave credit to her brother for killing the Avatar, and the Fire Lord welcomed him back home. Man, Mark Hamill is such a good voice actor. I remember when I was a kid, I didn't even know that was Joker and Luke. That's the only reason I would ever want to see Ozai and like anything else, just to have him voiced by Hamill again. Just give Hamill as much work as possible. That man is amazing. He can make his voice like really deep or very high to sound like Joker, or just it's really good. Yeah, that show was great. I really, it's sad that I had such high hopes for Korra, but it just seems as it went on, they really lost their way, and a lot of it had to do with the fact that there was always a plan for the Last Airbender from the time season one started to when it ended, and like I mentioned, the only thing that changed as far as like that overall story of Aang needing to face the Fire Lord and bring balance to the world, whatever, was that it was supposed to be 4 seasons and they cut one off because of Nickelodeon being ridiculous, right? And then when they finished season three, Nickelodeon ordered more, and that's how we got Korra, the first season of it anyway. Well, Korra, they didn't have an overarching story plot. They just had these like seasoned villains who have to like cram their whole story into 10 or 20 episodes that aren't even just about them, but also like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 other characters. So it never had the same focus. Like I think The Last Airbender would be a not horrible, but it would be a significantly less good show if Ozai was just the season one villain and then they go and like fight, some evil person in the Earth Kingdom. You know what I mean? Like the amount of attention that story had, this overarching narrative, really allowed the show to flourish in a way that its successor did not, because it wasn't as plotted out, it wasn't as thought out. It was just this hastily put together thing for the sake of having a new Avatar show. I like how he's nonchalant on a regular show. Yeah, Hamill is a very versatile actor. He's great. I think he might be my favorite voice actor other than Frank Welker, probably. I'll make a top 10 VA list. But yeah, I hope I explained time skips pretty well. They're not a bad thing by themselves, but when you have like major events happening and they're used as an excuse to not, like, just another example. There's a month-long time skip between the end of season two and the start of season three, right? Of the Last Airbender, and outside of people think like the news of Aang's supposed death reaching people, nothing major really happens to any of the main characters. Like Katara still acts the same way she did at the end of season two. Toph still acts the same way. Sokka still acts the same way. Aang is definitely the same because he's been asleep the whole time. I guess he's different because he grew some hair, but you get the idea that it. We actually get to see their development and how they process things in the actual season versus they were feeling sad and depressed and they got over it in that month that was off screen. I wish that Young Justice took a page out of that book and stopped using time skips to explain away everything. Like to Toriyama's credit, the only thing he would do with time skips before the Boo saga was just when he wanted somebody to have a baby. Like, oh, there's a 5-year gap between the original and Z. What happened? Well, pretty much nothing except now Goku has a kid. That's about it. There's a 3-year time skip between when Trunks warns about the androids when the androids come. Oh, what happened? Oh, they just trained and Vegeta has a kid. It's like, yeah, so and the difference between him and the other big baddies is that he could have very well taken over the world due to how overwhelming his forces were. I'm reading this backwards. Ozai was a well-written big baddie because he is a no-center of genocidal maniac who wanted to rule the entire world. That didn't need to be prefaced by the super sad backstory. Well, yeah, but also we don't like if you want to sell a villain as imposing, they don't need to have some tragic past. They can just, by the nature of what they have done to this world, allowed to have happen under their watch, treated their children, all these like everything that's happened to Zuko already tells us how horrible Ozai is before we even see his character. The scar on his face, the fact that he's been banished to go on this goose chase for an avatar that people haven't seen in 100 years. It's funny how the biggest problem I have with these writers and with people in real life too, to an extent, is that they act like everything has to be this big character arc of like, what happened to this person? How did they become this way? Some people are just evil. Like you don't need to try to diagnose everything and lay out some pattern of behavior. It's just someone did a horrible thing and that's it. The horrible thing they did is like if you see a serial killer, right? The horrible things they did are prefaced by their victims, what they did to their victims, their lack of remorse. You don't need to know about, oh, well, his dad used to hit him. Like, who cares? We don't need to know who Ozai's dad is, even though we do. We don't need to know what the relationship was. Because he's just a bad person. He's just a bad person who is physically imposing, who is threatening, who is a obstacle to Aang's wanting of peace, and that's why he needs to be defeated before he can inflict even more harm on the world. Ozai became the way because of Fire Nation propaganda delusions of grandeur fed to him by his grandfather Sozin. The Fire Nation family is actually really interesting. Like, I would love if they did like a prequel show just about Ozai and Iroh and like what just them and their dad. Like what caused the two of those brothers to be so different from each other. Preferably with Iroh as the lead, because I mentioned before he's great. That's why they brought him back in Legend of Korra. They're like, all right, we know you don't like Korra, but we know you like. But you get my point that the main concepts of an antagonist is that they have to be threatening to the protagonist, which Ozai succeeded with in spades before we even saw him. And they also have to be able to competently show that they're just a threat to the protagonist. They like even if I thought Ozai was like lacking in personality, like he doesn't have any like quirks that are like really memorable, it doesn't matter. He's still an imposing antagonist that they have to take 3 seasons to defeat. Him having a tragic backstory is not going to make me more interested in like seeing Aang defeat him, because everything that would make me want Aang to defeat him is already there. The way that his warriors the Fire Nation treats other nations, the way that he treated his own son, all of it is there. and they didn't need to give him a super sad backstory. Tell us about him because we saw the outcomes of the upbringing. That's my point. A lot of writers for shonen stuff, and to an extent, I'm gonna give you another example. Look at Thanos. It's like he's physically imposing. He doesn't have a sad backstory. He has a lot of. He's a character that is interesting because he's two dimensional, like or three dimensional, excuse me, because he has a code of honor, right? Impartial and completely fair extinction of half of people. Um, he clearly has emotions because he cries when over what happens with Gamora. So even without us knowing about his backstory or his past, or like seeing him as a kid being treated badly by his dad or whoever, he still is an interesting character to watch and one that is compelling enough to be considered one of the greatest film antagonists of the 21st century. Hell, look at Joker from The Dark Knight. We know nothing about his background there to where people are actually having to this day still make speculation videos about what happened to him. And people consider him an interesting antagonist because he's funny, because he has this like plot of wanting to just cause destruction and drama, and he's imposing and threatening because of how with his mind he can formulate plans and ideas. Like when he tells Bruce, or I guess Batman at that point, where Rachel and Harvey are, and he gives him the wrong directions or like switches the locations up. So when he goes to save Rachel, he accidentally saves Harvey, and then he causes Bruce to lose the love of his life. Again, threatening, imposing, a suitable antagonist for the hero without any need for a sad, tragic past. He believed that power equated to respect, and the best way to display power was through dominance and subjugation. I'm just saying that not every character needs to have some past that is so heartbreaking, and oh, why did they do this to them? You know, I probably would have preferred Pain if he was just a guy that, if he was like he was to Jiraiya what Orochimaru was to the third Hokage, where he's just a person that was treated like fairly decently by their master, or their not master but their sensei, and then just betrayed them and wanted them dead. Like I would have preferred that. Every character doesn't need sympathy. If they did a backstory for Ozai, it would be so great if like his dad treats him perfectly fine, right? Because there are plenty of people who have a good background and they still turn out to be scumbags. They still treat their kids like trash. You know, like if the only reason I would want them to do more stuff with his backstory is just like so we can see possibly more animated content where he's voiced by Mark Hamill. Just to give that VA some more work, you know. And it would also like help us to know, yeah, so he's just a bad person. That's all there is to it. He's a bad person who had good people, who are at least people that treated him in a serviceable way, and then he just treats them in a worse way. But everything has to be tragic and sad and when mommy didn't love me, all that stuff. Hell, even with like what's another good example? The hallmark of good writing is when you can get readers to morally disagree with the villain but understand why they're doing what they're doing. Yeah. That's why I really hate that they killed off Thanos after one movie. It's like you had this villain that you kept alluding to, and you did a really good job with him in Infinity War, and then you get rid of him and replace him with an alternate version of himself who is literally just there so the Avengers have somebody to fight this movie. Because every movie has to have like a main villain, so they just like, let's kill off the one from the previous movie and then Replace him with himself, except not as interesting. Yeah, they really outdid themselves. Because people always trash MCU villains, so that was a really big surprise for a lot of people. But yeah, it's just sad that writers now are so lazy that instead of showing us what happens to a character, they just say, "Oh, let's do a stupid time skip," and then now this person is a different person, and we can just say something happened. It's like, good job, guys. Give you a round of applause for that. So remember, if you're a writer and you don't want to do the hard work of making a character develop over the course of several episodes or movies or whatever, just have a time skip. Just have a time skip, say something happened, and that's it. And again, you don't have to always show everything, right? But I'll give you a good example. Let's say that in the Cell Saga, we saw Vegeta like slowly caring more about Bulma, right? And like spending more time with her. And it doesn't have to be every chapter or every episode, whatever, but it's like starting to happen a little bit. Then when they do the Boo Saga and they have the time skip and now he lives with her, I can completely buy that because of what they showed me in the previous season or saga or arc or whatever. Um, with with Young Justice, it's like you have all of these characters that have these major, like they change identities that are associated with them for years. You don't just decide that out of the blue. Okay, this person's not completely different, but we're not going to tell you how they got there or show you how they got there either. If they did a season of Young Justice, like let's say season two at the same eight from the first season, but they're like in different places, but we get like at least two or three episodes of where there's multiple flashbacks showing how they got there, I would be pretty content because they would be putting us in these interesting situations and then still developing the characters and showing us how they got to that point. Instead, it's just alluded to, it's talked about a little bit, but it's not nearly explored as much as it needs to be. Um, and I guess one of the worst examples is still Aqualad. Like he goes from being the leader of the group in season one to by the start of season two being part of the villains team after having lost the love of his life. We don't get to see him grieve over it. We don't see what caused him to like switch sides, and then we find out he's not actually a part of the OC. But still, like what caused like what was his response to losing this person he loved? What was his response? Like what caused him to think it's a good idea to do this like plot that's going to make me look like a villain and be hated by my own group? They just it, and it's that way with a lot of characters. Season one, Kid Flash and Artemis are on the team. They're enjoying their superhero life, whatever. And in season two, they're retired. What caused them to retire? Hey, look at Robin, season one. Batman's sidekick. Season two, he's his own hero with his new identity. There's been two Robins. What was his relationship like with Jason? What was his relationship like with Tim? What caused him to abandon the Robin identity that he theoretically had for years, or that we know he had for years? It's really sad because if this show actually focused on its characters, right, instead of just introducing more and more to pad out I guess, some weird count of having the most characters in any DC show ever, this series would be phenomenal. Because the writers showed during season one, if they're given a few to focus on for one season, they can make all of them very developed and complex and interesting. And they just refuse to do it after that first season. It's like the first season was some perfect mistake, and after that they got to do all the little underhanded stuff of like using time skips to get away with not actually developing things. And it's a really lazy way of writing, and it's been used by this show. It's been used by the Boo saga from Dragon Ball Z. It was used by Avengers Endgame. And even in those instances, it's not as bad because they have a core focus. With Young Justice, there is no core focus. like I said, Blue Beetle, most recurring and important character introduced after season one. After season two, barely shows up half the time. So it's sad. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed this. Um, I'd like to talk about the stuff because I write, so I like to avoid making these same pitfalls. I've given some examples of what they could have done if they wanted to do a time skip, but like still wanted to actually flesh out the characters. Because, like I said, I don't just criticize stuff to criticize. I always give a counterexample to illustrate what they could have done that, in my opinion, would make it a much better experience for me as a viewer. So, thanks for showing up. I will do another video tomorrow, obviously, and another stream on Saturday. So, see ya.